This week, the small Southern Highlands shooting range, which might become a large 7-day-a-week complex if Frank Sartor allows it.
To me, Frank Sartor's front garden would be a better site than this one for a shooting range.
Also, cold snaps, how to make the Snowy Mountains economy less reliant on snow, and Iguanagate, the musical.
There is nothing like a day.
Good evening, welcome to Stateline. I'm Nick Grimm, sitting in for Quentin Dempster. So, how sharp is the Shooters Party when it comes to using its political influence? Events over the past week in New South Wales have demonstrated you don't need a gun to commit acts of horrifying violence against your fellow man, woman or children. Even so, firearms and their availability remains a contentious issue. There were warnings about an increased risk of violence when the New South Wales Parliament voted recently to amend the state's gun legislation. Those laws were introduced in the wake of the Port Arthur massacre 12 years ago. Critics say the changes will make it easier for the deranged and criminally minded to get their hands on a gun. It comes as the New South Wales Shooters Party finds itself with unprecedented political influence. An embattled Yema government is desperate to please those who might support its controversial power privatisation and planning laws. We've been looking at some of the shooters' recent trophies. This is the hilltop area in the Southern Highlands, southwest of Sydney. From the air, some might look at this 800-metre-long clearing and see an unsightly scar on a pristine wilderness. But to those with a steady hand and a sure eye, it's a sitting target. Lex Wellham, persuade me why this bush shooting range should be transformed into a major complex.
Well, it's to cater for the large number of shooters that are shooting in this area.
It's going to cause property values to drop. It's going to cause distress in the community.
It's simply getting harder and harder to find land for a shooting complex.
The noise impacts of this place are going to be devastating to the local community.
This one has the advantage that it backs onto a state recreation area and there's virtually unlimited space for the safety templates that you need.
To me, Frank Sartor's front garden would be a better site than this one for a shooting range. That's why I'm fighting.
Weapons are drawn and the first shots in the gunfight of Hilltop have been fired as locals and shooters alike have answered the call to arms to fight for and against the proposal to enlarge the shooting range into a major complex. The state's planning minister is due to make a decision next month.
Mr Minister, I challenge you to come and ride this horse and then lead another young horse behind me with a young child and have those guns shooting and see how long you do last on a horse. And then you can make up your mind about that shooting range.
We thought, obviously wrongly, that we would get very little opposition to a range expanding an existing one rather than starting a new range from scratch.
I guess the question people are asking, Roy Smith, is has the Shooters Party been promised that shooting complex as a reward for backing the government when it needs support in the chamber?
No, not at all.
Clearly the representatives from the Shooters Party realise that they are in a powerful position. They've exploited it.
So, what's all the fuss about? Hilltop residents showed Stateline the bushland earmarked for the shooting complex. Leading the tour, their gun for hire, private ecological consultant Dr Stephen Ambrose.
The part of the site that's being proposed to be a shooting range. As a consequence of that, you'll have some of this endangered ecological community removed.
Stephen Ambrose argues the construction of the shooting complex will require the destruction of sensitive habitat for endangered species, including koalas.
If there's a lot of noise disturbance in this area, koalas are likely to avoid this area altogether, and so the shooting activity acts as a barrier to the movements of these particular individual koalas.
However, residents are being accused of exaggerating the likely noise problems, and to prove it, shooters have been conducting sound tests, measuring the decibels generated by different types of weapons.
Well, this 800-metre range has operated successfully here for 20-odd years and only became an issue with council becoming aware of it once the increased expanded complex was proposed.
But while the existing range is used only at weekends, the new centre will operate morning to night, 7 days a week. Residents fear it will also cater for much larger numbers of shooters. In fact, many times the number currently using the facility. Those living closest to the shooting range say they'll be inundated with more noise than they already cop when the existing range is busy.
It was good enough to get my 20-year-old son out of bed, which usually requires gelignite or something like that.
Hilltop sits in Sydney's water catchment area, and the locals also warn that lead ammunition could contaminate Sydney's water supply. But they believe their protestations are falling on deaf ears in Macquarie Street. Essentially what you're saying is that despite a plethora of reasons why the shooting centre shouldn't be here, the state government is determined to press on regardless.
They are determined. I mean, we have succeeded in delaying this process for at least 12 months, but everything that we hear is it's going ahead, it's going ahead, it's going ahead.
No, I think we have a legitimate right to apply for an expanded complex.
So a shooting complex will be low impact, so to speak?
Well, in terms of development in this area, this range has been here for 20 years. We haven't brought in any feral animals. We haven't planted any exotic trees. We've left the soil and water management as it was for that time, and I don't see that happening around the village. So I think we're a relatively good citizen in this area.
A good neighbour?
A good neighbour.
But whatever the arguments, it might be the shooters' lobby has simply been quicker on the draw where Frank Sartor is concerned. For a start, the Planning Minister has already classified the building of a new shooting centre as a project of state significance. That essentially means that if Mr Sartor is determined to give shooters what they want, the complaints of Hilltop locals won't amount to a hill of beans.
And I really get so angry that the idea that you can make something of state significance and suddenly all environmental aspects go out the window, council planning goes out the window, and quite without any transparency, they don't need to justify, Mr Sartor can lay down his decision and we have to put up with it. And that is not democratic.
Lee Rhiannon, why does the New South Wales Shooters Party have so much political clout at the moment?
Well, in the New South Wales Upper House, the government doesn't have the numbers.
Ask the New South Wales Greens and they'll tell you it all comes down to old-fashioned political horse trading.
They have developed a cosy relationship with the Shooters MPs in both obtaining support during election campaigns and then particularly once Parliament starts to operate, relying on their votes to get critical legislation passed.
With the state government keen to get its controversial planning amendments and power privatisation legislation through Parliament, the two Shooters Party members have found themselves being stalked by Labor power brokers bearing gifts. Last week they hit the bullseye, with the government and coalition voting together to rush through urgent amendments to the state's gun laws. But at the end of the day, Lee Rhiannon, can you really blame the Shooters Party for taking advantage of the leverage that it's got over a weakened state government?
Well, the Shooters Party say they're doing it for their constituents, but to jeopardise public safety, we would argue, is always wrong. And the government has been quite unprincipled in making deals that have actually wound back the national uniform gun laws that came in across Australia after the Port Arthur massacre, and New South Wales is now the first state that has weakened those laws, putting public safety at jeopardy. It's quite a dangerous way this has played out.
There's no watering down whatsoever. All we're looking for in this legislation is to remove some of the serious impediments on legitimate sports shooting. It is my first private member's bill seeking amendments to the firearms legislation, but it will not be my last.
Whether or not the amendments help put firearms into the hands of the deranged or criminally minded remains to be seen. But in the meantime, the Shooters Party plans to make the most of the political ammunition it's been issued. Roy Smith, gun laws, shooting complexes, the Greens say that these are some of your rewards that you're receiving from the state government in return for agreeing to back controversial legislation on planning issues and power privatisation and so on. Now, is that the case?
Well, if they're rewards, then they've been long fought for. I mean, we've been arguing with the government for a number of years over these issues. It's not just a matter of making a deal, as the Greens have suggested. The government's known our position for quite some time, and of course, for us, it's just a matter of coincidence that some of these more controversial bills have come out at the same time as our issues.
But you'd have to agree that government are a lot more receptive at the moment.
Well, look, the government certainly needs our numbers in the upper house, and certainly the shooters are very clear on what we hope to get support from the government on, and maybe we're just not so demanding as the Greens are on other issues.
Are you enjoying having that position of influence?
I certainly am, from the point of view that we're able to achieve things that we haven't been able to do in the past. And yes, look, I'm the first one to admit we've got a very cooperative and workable relationship with the government.